So there are many different ways of retouching the skin in Photoshop, but arguably one of the best methods is to use frequency separation. Frequency separation allows us to make changes to the skin without impacting the skin texture. If you're looking for realistic looking results, this is the method that you want to use, and this is what we're going to be talking about in this lesson, so let's get started. Let's do some frequency separation. This photograph is a perfect candidate for frequency separation. Now, the first time you're using this technique, it may seem a little bit overwhelming because there are a lot of steps involved, but keep in mind the more you do it, the easier it's going to become. And also, many of these steps can be automated. You can create actions for probably the first 60% of this technique, and it will make things very simple. So the first thing we want to do here is we want to make 2 copies of the background. We'll do that with Command J. We'll duplicate the background twice. We're going to name the bottom layer tone and the top layer texture. Now, how this works is we're going to tell Photoshop to separate this image into 2 areas. One area is going to contain all the tones, and then the other area is going to contain the texture. So this is how we do that. We first select the tone layer, we turn off texture, and we'll come up here into our filters and we'll select Gaussian Blur. Now we want to click on an area of the skin and bring the radius all the way down and pull it up until the texture of the skin just starts to disappear. So something like that. Click OK. So now we want to select the texture layer. We can go ahead and turn on the visibility for that. And we'll come over here to Image, Apply Image, and this is where the magic happens. We want to make certain that the source layer is the tone layer and that blending is set to subtract. Then we want to make certain that scale is set to 2, offset to 128. If your settings are correct, this is what you should be seeing, something like this. So what we're asking Photoshop to do here is to take the blurred version of our original image, the tone layer, and subtract it from the original version. And what we're left with is detail and texture. Go ahead and click OK. Now what we want to do is change the blending mode to linear light. And when you do this, if you've done this correctly, when you hide the texture in the tone layer, it should look exactly like the background layer. And you can see I'm clicking those 2 layers on and off, and there is no difference between the 2. So if those look exactly the same, you're heading in the right direction. Okay, so now let's create a new layer. We can call this Skin Smoothing. Now, before we start painting, we want to look at the overall image, in particular how the subject is lit and the direction of the light, because this will determine how we paint the face and also what skin values to choose. And if we create an adjustment layer, we'll do a threshold adjustment layer, we'll move this to the very top. This will allow us to kind of see the way that the light is falling on the face. You can see that the light is coming in from a high angle and is most bright on the upper left side of his face and then tapers off in intensity as you go further down the face. So as we paint in these bands of skin tone color, we're going to need to paint diagonally across the face to match the lighting. So this is useful information here. We know that the middle of the face is going to be less bright than this, and then of course this side of the face is going to be darker. We'll go ahead and delete that threshold adjustment layer and come back to our image. Now let's go ahead and zoom in, select the eyedropper, and make sure that your sample size is set to something a little bit higher, maybe something like 5x5 or 11x11. You want to make certain that it's not set to point sample. You don't want to sample an individual pixel, you want to sample an average of pixels. Now let's go ahead and start painting. So we'll start with this area right here. So what I want to first do is hold down my Option key, and I want to select a clean area of skin, a skin tone that I like, and I want to make sure that my skin smoothing layer is selected. I'll select the skin tone that I like, and I can come back in here and paint in this skin tone. Now you can see here that the lighting's starting to change, so we'll go ahead and take another sample and I will paint in with this color. And notice that as I'm painting this in, I'm not impacting the detail because the detail is on another layer. Now when you first do this, it is going to look strange, but we will fix all of this. I'll select another color and paint that in. And And as you're doing this, you want to follow the contour of the face. The purpose of this is to smooth out the skin, not to change the structure of the face. I'll go ahead and paint in this area, take another sample, take another sample, paint in this area, take a sample from the nose. And this is the part where you want to be especially careful because you don't want to change the structure of the nose. You'll notice if I start painting with the wrong color, it's starting to change the shape of the nose. I don't want to do that. I'm going to keep the original shape of the nose, so something like that. What we want to do is come back here into our skin smoothing layer. We're going to add another Gaussian blur, and this time I'm going to raise the radius to blend all the skin tones together, and you can see that the skin is already starting to look a lot smoother. I'll go ahead and click OK. I've done a really good job with smoothing out the skin. The color is fairly consistent. It looks like there's a couple other areas in here that I can probably come back and smooth this out just a little bit better. I'm going to lower my opacity down quite a bit and use a very, very soft brush. And I'm just going to kind of come back in here just a little bit and hit some of those blotchy areas. So the last thing I want to do, I'll come back in here and just bring down the skin smoothing layer just a little bit, just to incorporate some of the original, just a hair. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'll make a copy of my skin texture layer, and this will be the backup of the original. I'll go ahead and turn that off, and then this one I'm going to call skin texture correction. And then from here I can use spot healing brush or the healing brush, and I can just come back in here and take out some of this structural detail here. So sometimes when you're employing this technique, you might notice that the face starts to lose dimensionality. It starts to lose depth and becomes a little flat. And in this image, we've lost a lot of that natural shadow that was on the side of the face, so let's go ahead and bring that back in. So I'm going to first create a flattened copy of all the layers by holding down Shift, Command, Option E, and then I want to change the blend mode to multiply. I'll create a layer mask, and I'll fill that layer mask in with black. And then I can just come back in here and paint back in using a very light brush some of that detail. So I'm using multiply to darken the image, and then I'm using a layer mask painting with white to bring parts of the layer back in. And the last thing I'm going to do is lower the opacity just a little bit. Okay, and that's using frequency separation to smooth out the skin. Very, very powerful technique for skin smoothing. If you want realistic looking results, this is the technique you should be using. So again, here's the before and here's the after.